Hey guys, we're back again, Sean and Temi on the True to Kings platform. These are times we just talk about, things that are on our mind. And it's important that you all there know that these are ideas that we have. They're starting points for conversations. As always, we welcome comments. We welcome diversity in opinion. And happy to say that we're actually available on a multitude of platforms now, from the Google podcast platforms, Spotify, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and it would be great if we could hear your comments on of what you think about these things that we talk about, how it makes you feel, what kind of emotions it elicits in you, and actually, we have something going on right now where, between, the two of us, we're going to pick, the comment that we think is, the most thought provoking. And we will actually give out a brand new True to Kings t shirt that we have designed. And for right now, we're going to kick off tonight's conversation with my boy, Sean. What's up, man?
Hey, how you doing, Temi? What's up with you?
Man, everything is everything, man.
I love that.
Guess what? We're talking tonight about theft of culture. Yeah. Sometimes we've heard it called cultural appropriation, but that is basically the idea of what we're trying to talk about. Kick it out, bro.
Thanks, Temi. So the reason why we're having this conversation today is because I think in one of our earlier podcasts, I said that everybody looks for themselves in everything. Like you look for yourself in history, you look for yourself in religion, you look for yourself in whatever the cultural zeitgeist is, you look for yourself, in that zeitgeist. I think for me, it is always important to acknowledge the impact that Africa as a whole has had on cultures everywhere. I make no apologies for my definition of Africa. I have said often that to me, your nationality does not define where you're from. Your nationality is simply a passport. If you are a person of color, chances are that you are African. You can be an African American, an African Brit, an African French person. You can be an African Jamaican. You can be an African Antiguan, an African Barbadian. You are African. I think that the intervention of the oppressor in your particular history determined where you currently are now in terms of geography. But it does not take away from what you are. And what you are is an African. So today we're talking about cultural theft, appropriation. We're talking about what the impact of Africa has been on the zeitgeist of the world and whether or not that impact has actually been acknowledged. I've always said, and I keep saying this, that you can never look at a snapshot of anything and make a determination about the whole thing. To me, the best way to understand anything is you need to go to its genesis, to its beginning. I think the beginning of anything should give you an idea of how that thing was supposed to roll out. And for me, Temi, one of my concerns with appropriation, cultural and otherwise, is a continuation of the narrative that Africa didn't bring anything to the table.
Yeah, we know that's false.
Hey, dude. But it's false. But when I talk to the king, when I talk to the kingdoms, right, they need to understand where I'm coming from. I mean, there was a conversation recently on social media where some influencer, I won't mention her name, she's not even worth mentioning, and she rattled off a list of things, right, that definitely came from the African American experience. But to her, what she said was, well, I learned these things from social media. And I'm like, okay, that may be where you learned it from, but the genesis of those terms are all African American based, African based. And if you refuse to acknowledge where those things come from, then to me, it goes back to how people say things like, well, I don't see color. I'm like, you should see color. You should see me. Because when you see me, you acknowledge me.
That's right.
Don't take what I've given you and then say, well, I don't see you, but I see what you've given me. That to me smacks of somebody being disingenuous. And that's what I wanted to talk about today.
Yeah, I feel you on that, man, because being an artist, right? For instance, this appropriation thing. I have ideas about why, some of the cultural things, some of the ideas are taken, and the source of these ideas and things are not acknowledged. For instance, the Cubism thing. I'm an artist. Cubism. The whole idea of where Picasso got that whole concept from. Was from North African art. It's African art. But I bet a lot of people do not. This is historical fact. This is not just some thing that I just pulled out of the air, or some things that revisionist historians, in the black diaspora are trying to make up. It is not something hidden. The whole Cubism concept, originated actually from African art. Again, you may not necessarily, most people probably don't realize this. And this again is an example of cultural appropriation and not acknowledging the source of some of these things.
Absolutely. Yeah. And to me, that is where my anger comes from, right? Like, if you look around everywhere, I see my people in everything, but there seems to be some sort of general understanding amongst the oppressor that we can attribute what Africa has done to everybody else but Africa. And that bothers me, because when you look at it from that point of view, what you're saying is that we've never contributed anything to where we are right now. All evidence to the contrary. So, and I'm not talking about things like cornrowing your hair, or I'll give you an example. I watched a show a long time ago. It was an Oprah show, right? It was an Oprah show, and the audience, they were talking about not cultural appropriation as such, but what everybody brings to the table. And I remember a lady, and she was African American, and she said, well, if I look at it very, very plainly, I see a vast number of white people that are trying to be more like us, in the sense that you tan, like you literally go out of your way to tan, or you inject Botox into your lips to get fuller lips, or you go the other way to get a different shaped figure. These were things that historically you guys have looked down upon. I can tell you a number of stories of African women that were put in zoos, literally put in zoos, not just in Belgium, but also in England and all these other civilized countries. And people would pay money to come and look at these people. And now years later,
Yeah.
you're trying to approximate what they look like, but you're not giving any sort of credit that, okay, maybe there's a possibility that this might be closer to our concept of beauty than what we originally imagined. And here's my thing. I am not so much concerned about sharing culture. We should share culture. Like, America is said to be a melting pot. But if we're a melting pot, then I should be able to say to you that, yeah, pizza is Italian, right? Mm-hmm. And General Tso's is Chinese. But where am I? Like, where am I represented? here's the danger. Here's the danger. When you do not acknowledge what Africa brings to the table, this to me is reminiscent of when we were in slavery. Because when we were in slavery, nothing we did was of any sort of import. Everything that we did was attributed to the plantation that we came from. In other words, whatever we brought to the table was automatically for public consumption. Because we could not, back then, claim individual credit for what we were bringing to the table. So years later, when you are perpetuating the same thing, when you're saying to me that I'm going to take what you've given me, but I'm not going to acknowledge who gave it, what's the difference between now and the days of slavery? Yeah.
For me, this cultural appropriation thing, I'm not really into so much as having the taker acknowledge I'm not going to quite say it like that. The thing is, just from what you just said, right, I can begin to understand why maybe acknowledging where something came from becomes a little bit, not so important. Because if you have said, if you tell me that, in order to establish or to legitimize, your worldview, where your worldview says, these kinds of people, are second class, that worldview will not allow you to actually acknowledge anything positive from said people. So anything you get out of said people has to be, either you create a myth about where it actually came from, and the things that you do not require, the things that you do not need, you denigrate. Because this, nothing good can come out of these people, because if something good comes out of them, then your narrative becomes questionable. You see what I'm saying? So in that whole, thinking it through like that, I don't really, at some point, I'm not really too concerned about what the oppressor says or doesn't acknowledge about his version. My concern becomes what my people think about themselves and what they bring to the table.
Absolutely.
So a conversation like this is about building pride, making, my people, understand exactly who they are.
Absolutely.
And what they've brought to the table.
Absolutely.
Irrespective of whatever, bigger society or whatever says about, who you are. It takes me back. I always bring these things, man. I born in Africa, grew up in Africa, went to school in Africa and everything. I remember, I was taught about this Scottish dude, Mungo Park coming to Africa, right? Nigeria is, kind of called after this great river in West Africa called the River Niger, right? And this dude comes to Africa, and we're taught that he discovered, the River Niger.
Man, I think always makes me laugh.
Yeah, where, when he came there, the people who actually helped him navigate this waters.
Guess what? Here's a river that has not been lost, and I just discovered it.
I just discovered it. So stupid concepts like that. To me, it's all part of this appropriation thing. So we all grew up with this myth. I remember, man, I took exams, I was tested on this thing.
Who discovered the River Niger?
Then I have to write Mungo Park. What does that tell you? What does that tell me about my people who were there originally?
So here's the thing. And I love what you just said. My concern really is not for the narrative of the oppressor. My concern is what we have taken on board.
That's right.
And what we have now used to shape our own narrative. And that's what scares me. I'll tell you a story. So you're talking about Mungo Park and the River Niger, right? I was in, and God forgive me, I forget exactly where I was, but I was in some hotel some hotel. It was a 5-star hotel. It wasn't in America. I think it was either in Asia or somewhere in maybe the Middle East, or either in Asia or in the Middle East, right? So here's what's funny about that hotel. So obviously you had the main. So it was on the water. Mm-hmm. Beautiful property. It was on the water, right? And the hotel must have cost maybe something like $200 to $400 a night to stay in the main hotel. So the first time we got there, right? The first night we got there, we actually took a walk around the property, and I saw some. I'm not lying to you, Temi. I saw some huts. Right? Now, these huts were arranged on the actual water, right? So the person that was taking us around, I was like, hey, what are those? It's like, oh, those are part of the hotel, but it's a different class. I'm like, what do you mean it's a different class? I'm like, can I see those? So we went to those huts. There was one that was available, right? So we went to those huts, sat on the water. It had a glass bottom. So it had a glass bottom so you can actually see into the water, right? But there was no television, right? No air conditioning, right? It was literally a hut with a glass bottom. And I say to this guy, I'm like, how much are these huts? Dude is like, yeah, these huts like $1,000 a night. I'm like, yeah, well, that's too rich for my blood. So we go back. But then that night, I'm thinking about it. I'm like, a hut. $1,000 a night hut. Hang on a minute. We used to live in huts.
Yeah.
When we lived in huts, you told me
I was backward.
I was backward. That I was primitive.
Yeah.
Right? You fast forward how many ever years later, you're now figuring out that what I used to do is actually more sustainable than what you are doing. And you're now charging people more money for what I considered my norm.
Which unfortunately I've abandoned.
Which I've now abandoned because I have now taken on your idea of civilization. So you're selling the huts that I used to live in at $1,000 a night. So my concern really has never been for the narrative of the oppressor. My concern has always been how my people view themselves.
True.
And what I'm trying to say is, listen, whatever else you're told about yourself, understand one thing, it is never the truth. But herein lies
The truth.
the truth.
That's what we're doing.
Herein lies the truth. What you have abandoned as backward and savage, they've now embraced as sustainable. So whilst you are killing yourself, spending God knows how much money on what they've given you as the epitome of civilization, they are actually appropriating what you used to do 1,000 years ago.
Yep.
And say that, honestly,
That's the real deal, right?
this is the real deal. So that's what's scary to me.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. At some point in time, hey, when ideas like these, what we're talking about, are thrown out there and my people think about it a little bit, each person, to each his own. If you now decide that, okay, listen, I now want to confront, I now want to have a conversation, a dialogue, with, other ideas. You want to engage other ideas, all well and good, But before you can do that, you need to actually understand who you are, be able to appreciate who you are, not be ashamed of who you are or, where you come from, so that you can now begin to stand toe to toe and engage, these so-called prevalent ideas,
Absolutely.
that want to, put you down.
Absolutely.
That's pretty much what my interest in these conversations are.
I will say one thing. I will say that it has never been in the interest of the oppressor to educate you to a point where you can overthrow him.
Oh, of course not.
The oppressor is not interested in educating you so that you can get rid of him.
No, he's trying to maintain it.
He's trying to maintain.
Yeah.
So this education, unfortunately, lies with you.
That's right.
One of the things that I've always said is that where we are right now as a kingdom of black people, is not by mistake. Where we are right now as a kingdom of black people is designed. You need to understand that it was necessary to miseducate the black person in order to subjugate him.
Absolutely.
Part of the miseducation of the black person was saying to him that you came to me with nothing.
Nothing. On your knees.
And I gave you everything.
That's right.
If there was ever anything that would make me cry, it would be that. You came to me with nothing, and I gave you everything. One of the myths about civilization is this, and I was thinking about this the other day. Civilization to me has many outputs. One of those outputs is wearing very, very inconvenient clothes. Like, I am yet to understand what a cravat or a tie is designed to do. But follow me on this. There's somewhere I'm going with this.
Okay.
So you went around the world on your adventures, right? You went around the world. You went to Hawaii, Africa, Tahiti, Vietnam, everywhere. And all these savages, all these so-called savages, they would come out of their house, look at the sun, say, you know what? It's too hot today. I am going to wear something, right, that is in keeping with the temperature of where I live. So if you are in Hawaii, you're wearing grass skirts or a sarong or what have you. Same thing in Vietnam. In Africa, we're wearing loose clothing so that air can circulate. In some parts of the world, they're wearing maybe a skirt, a kilt or something, and nothing else. Why? Because as savage as we were, we understood what the temperature was, how hot it was, and how we needed to live in balance with all of these things. Here comes civilization. Civilization says, no, even if it is hot, you need to wear a suit.
And a tie.
Even if it is hot, you need to find some way of wearing these, back then, these skin-tight pants that God knows how they used to get into. If you were a woman back then, a civilized woman, you had to wear a corset that you had to be forced into. And then every night you had to be cut out of that corset. But we, savages, we, barbarians, we would wear clothes that were sustainable. We would wear things that was in keeping with where we were. And yet, we
are the savages.
We are the savages. We had the common sense to understand where we were and then dress appropriately. But you would come in and regardless of what you saw, you'd wear inconvenient clothes. And that makes you civilized? Here's the kicker. So many years later, right? 52 weeks in a month. Okay, you would work how many weeks? You'd work maybe 44 to 48 weeks in a month. And then you now take a holiday, okay? For those 44 weeks, you're wearing suit and tie, killing yourself, right? But then when you go on holiday, when you go to these tropical paradises, bro.
As scantily as you can't get.
What are you wearing? You're trying to be as scantily clad as you can be. So my question is, who got it right and who got it wrong? Cultural appropriation.
Yeah, it's vicious, man.
It's a vicious thing.
You know, in that your example that you gave, It's, for me, I look at it like cultural appropriation in that context is whack. It's fake, because in the sense that, I can't impose my culture. I shouldn't rather impose the things that my place, my geographical where I come from imposes upon me. The example you just gave about the tie, the cravat, and all of that. Yeah, you're from a temperate place. You want to get as much clothing upon you as you can, to ward off the cold and everything. But again, going back to what I was saying earlier about, none of this so-called making the other person, calling the other person a savage. It's not by chance. I personally believe that it were all intentional. It's all part of a subjugation mentality. Make their culture feel, make them feel like their culture is inferior. Make them feel like, there's another element to this, that their system of doing things is against Almighty God.
You haven't actually thought this through.
Yes, you haven't actually thought this through.
Your conclusions are not sophisticated.
So all of those things were actually put in place because of the ultimate desire, the design, of this meeting of cultures. And the reason I say that is because historically, I remember, some of the readings I've made, I've had, of when the very early Portuguese visited, the West African coast.
Absolutely.
The letters they wrote back to
They
Portugal.
were shocked.
They were shocked. This thing.
They were
so
shocked.
impressed about, the cultural, the cultural sophistication of this place that they're visiting. So that was
clean roads.
Clean roads, well lit. Well lit at night.
Not a beggar in sight.
Not straight streets.
Streets.
Yeah.
Doors not locked.
These were all things that are written and they're not hidden. They're not hidden today. You can research and find these things. So if that was your original impression, right? Again, I'm making it sound like it's a question, but it's really not a question because that really was your original impression. And for a while these different cultures, met, intermingled, there was mutual respect. But where things turned was when the Europeans observed the wealth, in Africa, and it became a great thing. It became a thing where you need to take without pain. And there stories you can read today. Their histories. The thing. I happen to know much about the West African and the Nigerian context of it. People like King Jaja of Bobo. Chief Nana from the Shakiri land. These guys who started out as equal business people, buying and taking, when the British decided that, man, we want to get more and we didn't want to pay him any more, that is when the conflicts and they started to devise, these narratives of savages and, anti-God and all kinds of negative connotations to things that were African because they wanted, it became about subjugation. It became about, feeling superior so that you can defend yourself. You not defend yourself as, protect yourself physically, but defend a mental and, a narrative that says we are better and the reason we can take is because these people are sub. You know what I mean?
No, you're absolutely right. If you go to a lot of the movies back in the 1940s, the 1950s, the 1960s, and the way that we were represented as savages that, we ate human beings, we cooked white people, we ate them, and that we were also intellectually incurious.
Right.
That we had existed on this planet and things just happen to us, and almost in a childlike state, because we were developmentally inferior. Things just happened to us, and we were only ever concerned about basic needs. The need to eat, the need to shelter, the need to be warm, or what have you. But and that we were never concerned with higher functioning thought, like aesthetics, philosophy, religion. That we never asked basic questions like, why are we here? And to your point, that then gave them the platform to do unto us what they wanted to take.
Yeah, without compensation.
Without compensation.
You I just wanted to double click on something you just said. Even going back again historically, to talking about you come to a place and you say these people are backwards and all of this. The oldest university in the world today, man, traceable, is still from West Africa, from the ancient kingdom of Mali, where Timbuktu is.
Absolutely.
The Sankore Madrasa.
You know what you call that? You call that an inconvenient truth.
I feel you on that, man.
But you know the funny thing? For you to find that truth is not revealed to you in kindergarten. It's not even revealed to you in elementary school or in high school. That truth is going to be revealed to you, if you want it, when you're in university, by which time your mind has already been shaped in a certain way to understand a lie that was never true.
That's right.
So going back to what we said, my concern has never been about the oppressor. As a matter of fact, I was talking to a friend of mine, and I was saying to him that at some point, our conversation may not even be with the oppressor, because you are asking somebody who has set out his stall, who has set out a narrative in order to continue his way of life. You are asking him to change. My conversation is now with the king and the kingdom. And that is simply this. Everything that you've ever been told about your position, your contribution, has been told to you by somebody whose very existence depends on you not bringing anything to the table. I'll give you an example. I wonder how many things have been attributed to Benjamin Banneker. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes, sir.
I'm also intrigued about how many things, for this 400-year misadventure that we had in America, how many things were actually attributed to slaves. Slaves that day in, day out, working sun up to sundown, would think to themselves, I need to figure out a way to make this thing easier. How many of those things were actually attributed to the slave? One of the biggest modes of theft in this country, right, has always been the United States Patent Office.
Oh man,
the patent office has been, the patent office has been the overseer of such injustice. Because to a people that were not allowed to read and write, where even reading and writing was considered a sin or a crime punishable by imprisonment or death, you then, through your own industry, you devise something to make your life easy. But then the master now takes it, runs to the patent office, and records that thing in his name.
That's appropriation.
That's appropriation, babe.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
That's what I'm talking about. That's what we're talking about.
That's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So when I say all these things, what I keep saying to people is this: do not look in the traditional places for what you have done or what your influence is. Because those traditional places have been designed to whitewash you out of history. So here's my message to the king. Here's my message to the king concerning cultural theft. Nobody needs to wait for anyone to acknowledge what your contribution to history is. You are everywhere. You can see yourself everywhere. And I am begging the king, stop looking to the oppressor to validate your existence. They just ain't gonna do it.
No, you just ain't gonna do it. And on a personal note to myself, one of the things that really hurts about this cultural appropriation thing, where we look for validation from somebody else. I personally I love the blues. I love jazz. The two original American art forms, that are not quite as popular as they used to be back, 40s, 50s, 60s. These were art forms, again, the two original American art forms created by black people, but they are no longer quite mainstream.
No.
And personally, I don't believe that is just because that's just not happenstance, man.
Yeah.
So, hey, word to the kings, validate yourself.
That's right.
Acknowledge yourself.
That's right.
Your contribution to history.
That's right.
Your contribution to culture.
That's right.
Your contribution in every phase of life.
Yeah.
And it is not about what somebody else thinks you are or you ought to be. Yes, but who you are.
The oppressor is not designed to validate your existence.
Yes, sir.
Trust.